Hi everyone, so we are solving November 2018 today. This is paper 3, Weighted 2. In question number 1, they say, in which situation are there definitely positive externalities? Well, positive externalities can happen both in the consumption side and in the production side. So if it happens on the consumption side, what we say is this: that social benefit must be greater than private benefit, and that's why there has to be a positive externality where social benefit is exceeding private benefit by the amount of positive externality. Similarly, if social cost is less than the private cost, then you are basically causing less sort of cost to society. That's also a case of positive externality. So in this case, the best answer will be C, where social benefit is greater than private benefit. We will have what we call positive consumption externality. However, if this was a choice where social cost was less than private cost, we could have chosen that too. Just to quickly go through other choices, when you look at this one, private benefit exceed private cost, this means that a consumer will go on and do this task because the benefit to the individual is more than the cost to the individual. Similarly, B says private benefit exceeds social benefit. If private benefit is more than social benefit, this means this is a negative externality. Like in the case of, for example, negative externality, consumer benefit more than the society's benefit. So B can't be the right answer. And in D, they say social benefit is exceeding private cost. If social benefit exceeds private cost, we need to look at social benefit versus, for example, private benefit and not private cost. So when we look at private cost, we compare it with social cost. When we look at social benefit, we look at private benefit. So this doesn't also match. So the right answer in this case is C. In question number 2, they say a cost benefit analysis is carried out on the construction of a hydroelectric power station. Which combination of circumstances would most likely to lead to the scheme being approved? In such a case where, when you look at cost benefit analysis, CBA will always approve a project where social cost, in other words, social benefit exceeds social cost. So if social benefit is greater than social cost, we will always go ahead and do a project, and that's exactly why B is the right answer. Social benefit are greater than social cost, we will do that project, because in cost benefit analysis we look at both private and external benefit and private and external cost, and we compare that to find out our social cost and social benefit, and if social benefit is more than social cost, we will go ahead and do the project. In the third question, they say what does not pose a threat to the achievement of allocative efficiency. Remember, allocative efficiency happens because of in a market where there is no externality, and because of no externalities, or because of no what we call under or over provision. So what does not pose a threat to allocative efficiency, we say will be B, because income inequality has nothing to do with efficiency. But look at externalities or presence of monopolistic composition and even imperfect information. All three of these could result in either under or over provision or market failure in terms of externality. So market failure happens if there is ever allocative inefficiency, and income inequality is not a concern of efficiency. So for us the right answer will be B, because inequalities are not efficiency concerns. The diagram shows budget lines and indifference curve. The consumer's initial position is T, so the consumer right now is at T. The price of good X then falls. So right now you are at T, and if the price of good falls, then you will now be on the new budget line, which is JL. So if you were at JK and you were, for example, consuming, let's say, Q1, which is point T, the first thing will happen will be we will draw a line which is parallel to this budget line, and we will find out what we call our new consumption, which is on the same indifference curve. So when I move from T to U, this is what we call, let's call T to U movement, this is what we call substitution effect. Now if I move to S, which is beyond Q2, this will be the case for normal goods, because substitution effect is saying buy more, income effect is also saying buy more. So if I go from Q2 to, let's say, this combination Q3 or on S, this is what we call a normal good. But if I am between Q1 and Q2, which is this combination R, we will call this to be inferior good, which is non-given. But if I go to, for example, a combination which is P, which is before Q1 or before T, I will call it inferior good, which is given. So now with this knowledge, we can now look at the answer choices. So which combination of statement about the movement in this diagram is correct? So when I look at this, when I go from, for example, when I go from T to U, I have my substitution effect happening. So T to U, I have substitution effect happening. So C and D makes sense. Then T to Q represents the normal good is wrong, but U to P represents an income effect is the right statement for me. So the right answer in this case is D, because when I move from Q1 to Q2, that's my substitution effect, and then U to any movement, for example, U to S, U to R, U to P, all of that will show my sort of income effect for different kinds of goods. So D is the right answer in this case. In question number 5, they say the diagram shows the various combinations of apples and rice which are potentially available to a consumer. If standard indifference curves were added to the diagram, they would show that the consumer is indifferent between X and W. Now what we do in this question is that we will make a standard indifference curve. That's what they're saying. If we make a standard indifference curve, that should pass from X and W. Now if you look at this standard indifference curve, Z then become an option which is beyond the indifference curve, let's say I0. I can call this Z to be in indifference curve, let's say I1. If such is the case, then what we say is this: D is the right answer. The consumers prefer combination Z to W because Z is on an indifference curve which is to the right of the indifference curve on which W is, because I1 is better than I0 when it comes to preferences. In question number 6, they say the schedule shows the short run marginal cost of producing good X, and they give us different units. They provide us marginal cost, and they also said this, that given that the total fixed cost is 50, which level of output minimizes average total cost? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a 0 here. So for 0, my total cost is only the fixed cost, which is 50. And then for the first unit, the marginal cost is 45, which is the cost of making one extra unit, which means 50 plus 45 or 95 is my total cost of making the first unit. And so what I'm going to do is first make this table for total cost. When I do so, this is the value that I get. So for example, 45 plus 50 is 95, 40 plus 95 is 135, and then 135 plus 30 is 165, and so on. From this, I'm going to find out what we call our average total cost, which is simply total cost divided by the quantity. So for example, 95 divided by 1 will be 95, and then 135 divided by 2 will be 67.5, and then 165 divided by 3 will be 55, and then 185 divided by 4 will be 46.25, and then 205 divided by 5 will be 41. So in this case, the average total cost is minimized at D, which is the value which is 41. So the way we go about doing these questions is to remember that if they give you fixed cost of 50, this means that at the 0th unit, our fixed cost is 50, which will be then added to the marginal cost to find out the cost at various units. In question number 7, they say what must be found in two markets for price discrimination to be profitable? Well, we say if price discrimination has to be profitable, then price elasticity demand has to be different. And that's why A is the right answer, which says different elasticities of demand. So, for example, if the demand is inelastic in one market, we will be able to charge a higher price, but if the demand is elastic in another market, we will be charging a lower price. So, elasticity of demand has to differ for price discrimination to be profitable. Number 8 says a firm maximizes its profits by maximizing total revenue. What does this imply? Well, MC is equal to MR is the condition for profit maximization. So if you're maximizing your total, you're maximizing your profit by maximizing total revenue, then we are looking at a situation where TR is maximum, and TR is maximum at a point where MR is 0. So if this is my demand curve, my MR will be like this. So demand curve and MR. So when MR is 0, TR is maximum, which will mean the idea will be that MR must be equal to 0. Now if MR is 0, then this means MC must also be equal to 0 for total revenue to be maximum. So that's why C is the right answer, which says that marginal cost is 0. Because if marginal cost is 0, then MR 0 will make the total revenue to be maximum at MR 0. Question number 9 says this: technological change reduces the minimum efficient scale of production in an industry. What is likely to result? So what is minimum efficient scale? We say minimum efficient scale is the point where LRAC is at its lowest. So this is the point where LRAC at its lowest is what we call minimum efficient scale. Now this is the point also where you are achieving economies of scale, and being this a point where minimum efficient scale or MES is achieved, we say this that the average cost is probably, let's say, at AC1 at the lowest point. Now firms will want to strive to be at point A or minimum efficient scale because that means they are achieving lowest possible cost. And if there's a technological change which reduces the minimum efficient scale, so let's say previously you were making 200,000 units, now probably you don't need to make those 200,000 units. You can even make, for example, 100,000 units to achieve that, which means you could achieve economies of scale quicker and you don't need to be big in size. So the first thing is this, that what is it going to result? And the answer is a reduced size of firms, because firms will not need to be worried about achieving minimum efficient scale through a large size, because a small size is allowing firms to still achieve the minimum efficient scale. So B and D are possibly the right answers, where the reduced size of firms are as an option given. Now, will the number of firms go up or down? Because A says increased number of firms, B says increased number of firms, and D says reduced number of firms. And the answer is, well, there will be an increased number of firms, because it becomes easier for firms to enter when the minimum efficient scale is not so big. If the minimum efficient scale is reached at a very large output, then a lot of firms will shy away, because they know that they will not be able to achieve economies of scale that easily. But with the minimum efficient scale to happen quicker, there could be a higher number of firms that can enter the market. So B is the right answer. In question 10, they say the diagram shows the cost and revenue for a firm in imperfect competition. Which level of output would produce only a normal profit? The condition for normal profit is price must be equal to ADC. And here the demand curve or AR curve gives you the price. So price equals to ADC at this point D. So therefore D is the right answer. In question 11, they say, what would be a reason why small firms do not survive? Well, one of the reasons why small firms do not survive is because in certain industries there are economies of scale. B says small firms often supply personal services. Well, that's a reason why small firms survive, and that's why the question is asking us why small firms do not survive, or what is the reason for large firms to survive. And A is the reason why large firms survive, because large firms are the ones which can achieve economies of scale. Small firms also often supply products the size of the market for which is limited, and that's why large firms don't want to enter the market. So C also becomes the reason why small firms survive, and D is also a reason why small firms survive, because sometimes small owner managed firms involve less risk because they're not willing to expand. In question number 12, they say, what is the implication of a dominant oligopoly following a limit pricing policy? So, what is limited pricing policy? Limit pricing policy is simply when an oligopoly or a monopoly lowers the price only in the short run to destroy competition, which otherwise won't be able to sort of match that price. And once that competition is completely destroyed, they will then increase price in the long run. So that's why D is the right answer, where the oligopolist will sacrifice short-term profit only for long-term profit. So long-term profits where firms will not be around, you can make a lot of profit, and as a result, the limit pricing will work. In question number 13, they say transport economists estimate the price elastic demand for private car use is very low, which means inelastic. What would be the most effective way of reducing road traffic congestion? So, if you are dealing with a good which is price inelastic, clearly subsidies or taxation may not be the way to go forward. We need to basically try to put a regulation in place, and that's why 13A may make sense, where banning private cars and lorries from town centers will be the right answer. So A makes sense here. So A is the right answer. But let's look at other options as well. So the next option says, B says, introducing a subsidy to lower the price of used bicycles. Well, we could basically give a subsidy to competition, but that may not work because the good is inelastic, so people may not quickly switch. C says introducing road pricing on all main roads. Well, if you put road pricing on all main roads, this means that basically you are putting a price for all main roads, which means that people may still not switch, because that means that demand is inelastic, so price is going up, so quantity demanded may not change. Similarly, in D, it's also a pricing policy where subsidizing public transport, which means a substitute to your private cars, may not work. So remember this, that all the other strategies where we're using pricing may not work too well, because when this good is inelastic, when private cars is inelastic, people may not switch completely. There will be a very little change in quantity demanded. In question number 14, they say, what would help to explain why there was a reduction in inequality in a country during the post-2008 economic recession. So the gap between the rich and the poor are going down. The possible reason could be C, the existence of minimum wage, because minimum wages will guarantee wages for those people who have low income to have a higher income to start off with. But let's also look at other answer choices, why other choices are wrong. A decline in the share of wages in the national output means basically overall wages are going down, so that doesn't make sense. A decline in the trade union bargaining power means if trade union lose power, then basically wages will go down and not go up, so that doesn't make sense too. And the trend towards later retirement means people are basically retiring later, which means that probably at retirement your salary is probably going to be much higher, so that doesn't really make sense in terms of poor people becoming well off. So we need to choose an answer choice where poor people are basically becoming better off, and C makes the most sense, which is the existence of minimum wage. In 15, they say, how is MRP or marginal revenue product calculated? We know this marginal revenue product is MP times MR, and in perfect competition it's MP times P. So the right answer for us will be MRP will be marginal physical product times MR, or A. In question number 16, they say a firm currently employs 30 workers at a daily wage of $50 each. The marginal cost of employing one extra worker is $112 per day. By how much will the firm have to increase the daily wage in order to increase its labor force from 30 to 31 workers? So the way we solve these questions is that we know this, that marginal cost is 112, which means total cost from hiring, for example, 31 workers minus total cost from hiring 30 workers is equal to the marginal cost, which is basically 112. So what's the total cost of hiring 31 workers? Well, we'll say because they're saying by how much will the firm have to increase the daily wage. Let's call it x. X times 31 minus 30 times 50. 50 is the wage rate given here, and 30 is the number of workers. So the answer will be 31x will be equal to 112 minus plus 30 times 50, or 31x is equal to 112 plus 1500, which is going to be 1612, which when you divide by 31 will come out to be 1612 divided by 31 will be 52. So this means that the new salary has to be 52. So by how much will the firm have to increase the daily wage in order to increase its labor force from 30 to 31 workers? And the answer is by $2. So $2. Why? Because previously the wage was $50. Now it's going to be $52. So $2 increase will be giving us the answer. In question number 17, they say in the diagram, HN is the initial supply of labor faced by a firm, and RM is his initial marginal cost. So this is the initial supply curve. This is the marginal cost of labor. So remember this, guys. Whenever the supply curve is upward sloping, we're looking at basically monopsony situation. What will be the firm's new labor supply curve if the worker join a trade union and achieve a union negotiated wage rate OW? So if they negotiate a wage rate of OW, then basically your supply curve will be this much or more. So the right answer in this case for this question number 17 will be WKN or D. The logic here is this, that the workers are saying we will want at least OW or more, but nothing less. So this part of my supply curve will no longer be valid. So D is the right answer. In question number 18, they say output per worker in an industry increases more slowly than the industry's total output. So the output per worker is increasing but slowly, but the industry total output is going up, which means there must be an increase in employment. If there is an increase in employment, what does that mean? Basically, will be more workers are employed, and if more workers are employed, this basically means the total output will go up. The total output may rise, but total output over a number of workers, when you find that, because the number of workers are also going up, your total output per worker may not go up as fast, and that's why B is the right answer. Let's also look at other choices. For example, A says a decrease in labor productivity. Well, if the labor productivity goes down, then basically what we say is that the total output should not go up, but it should actually go down. Similarly, an increase in overtime working would mean same workers are working overtime, output per worker should go up if the total output is also going up. An increase in the hourly wage rate means higher wages. That has to do something with the cost and not with the output. So D doesn't make sense too. So that's why B is the right answer. In question number 19, they say on a diagram showing the PPC, production possibility curve, what definitely represents long-run economic growth? Long-run economic growth is simply shown by a outward shift of the PPC. So D is the right answer. Whenever we show economic growth, there won't be a movement along the curve, but there will be what we call a shift of the curve to the right. In question number 20, they say when is economic growth most likely to promote economic development? Remember, the difference between economic growth and development is this, that economic development may include other factors, for example, your standard of living, for example, your education and schooling, and as well as your health indicators, and even like health facilities and infrastructures, and a lot more than economic growth. Economic growth is simply a change in GDP, a percentage change in GDP. So what are they saying? They're saying this, when is economic growth most likely to promote economic development? And the right answer for this one is D, which says when it provides the funds to finance cleaner production processes. Cleaner production processes will mean that there is a better environmental sort of production process, which means that there is both economic growth happening, but at the same time economic growth is not ignoring economic development and not ignoring negative externalities. In question number 21, they say which item in the table are classified as foreign aid. Well, foreign direct investment and portfolio investments are not aid, but official development assistance is aid. So I'm going to have a yes here and a no here. So the right answer will be B in this case. Remember, this foreign direct investment and portfolio investments are basically investments, while aid is one where we are looking at development happening. Although investments can result in development, but that's not the purpose of investment. The purpose of investment is to make profits. So that's why in question number 21, B is the right answer. In question number 22, they say country X's living standard were compared with country Y's living standard using real GNP per head or per capita converted into US dollar. Country X was ranked above country Y. Which factor might have caused this ranking to be incorrect? Well, in these kind of questions, normally these are questions of what we call purchasing power parity rates. Actual market exchange rate were used rather than purchasing power parity, and that's why A is the right answer. And the reason is very simple. When you're looking at two countries and you are using a single exchange rate like US dollar, the problem with US dollar is that it does not look into account the cost of living in two countries, which means that the purchasing power parity rate could be a much wiser way to look at countries rather than the nominal exchange rate. And that's why A is the right answer, where when we look at purchasing power parity rates, then we can get the better ranking rather than a nominal exchange rate. In question number 23, they say in 2007, Turkey had a population of 73 million. Its labor force was 36 million, of which 12 million were trained for the primary sector and 24 million were trained for the secondary and tertiary sector. The unemployment rate was 10%. What was the number unemployed? So the idea is this, that if the labor force is 36, then 10% of 36 is basically going to be 3.6, which is your total unemployment. Now, they gave you figures for primary sector and secondary sector. It doesn't really matter as long as we know the labor force is 36 million, and this 36 million of are people who are willing and able to work, of which only 10% are unemployed, which means 3.6 million people will be unemployed. So that's why for 23, C is the right answer. In question number 24, they say economy's manufacturing share of real GDP fell from 30% in 1970 to 12% in 2016. What type of unemployment would result from this? Well, if there is a shift of production from, let's say, manufacturing, or shift of, let's say, percentage of GDP from manufacturing to services sector, or means that the manufacturing sector is declining, and this is what we call a long-term decline rather than a short-term decline. And this long-term decline results in what we call structural unemployment, where people lose jobs in a long-term basis, and the only way they can gain jobs again is by retraining themselves or getting new skills for the other sectors. In question number 25, they say, in an open economy, when autonomous investment increases by 100, equilibrium national income increases by 300. So this means that change in AE times multiplier is equal to change in Y, where change in AE is the autonomous investment, which is 100, times multiplier is equal to 300, which means multiplier is equal to 3. Now the formula of multiplier is 1 over 1 minus MPC, which means 1 minus MPC will be equal to, if I put 3 on the other side, 1 over 3, which means MPC will be equal to 1 minus 1 over 3, which is going to be 2 over 3. So the right answer in this case will be the MPC is 2 over 3. In question number 26, they say that diagram outlines the monetary transmission mechanism following an expansionary central bank intervention, quantitative easing. Key action have been omitted from the process. So basically, when the quantitative easing is happening, we notice the money supply has to go up, because that's what quantitative easing is. So what the central bank does is that if the central bank buys government assets, then basically they will give money to the economy. So money supply goes up, which results in short-term interest rates to fall, because when the money supply goes up, your interest rate goes down. And I can show you this in the diagram. If this is my money demand or liquidity preference, if this is my money supply, if money supply goes up, something like this, then the interest rate will go down. A fall in interest rates basically from R0 to R1 will result in investment demand to go up or increases or rises, and the reason is very simple, because the cost of borrowing is going down and the incentive to save is going down, so people will basically invest more, and that may result in real GDP to go up. And that's why A is the right answer, where the central bank buys government assets, which result in short-term interest rates to fall and investment demand to rise. In question number 27, they say in Keynesian's monetary theory, when will an increase in supply of money not cause a fall in the interest rate? So this is the time when we draw a liquidity preference curve, the one that we just draw. When we look at money demand, what if money demand is like this, perfectly elastic at some lower interest rate? Let's say at R0 it becomes perfectly elastic. Now when I increase money supply, for example, from MS0 to MS1, you can see this, that the interest rate is not changing. So this is what we call liquidity trap, and if the liquidity preference schedule or the demand for money LP curve is perfectly elastic, which happens at a very low interest rate, then we will see the rise in money supply may not result in interest rate to change. And that's exactly what Keynesian's criticism is to the monetary theory. The diagram shows an economy in equilibrium at point X. What would be most likely to cause the economy to move from X to Y? Well, if the economy moves from X to Y, SRAS has to shift to the right from SRAS not, let's say, to SRAS1. That means basically something which is to do with supply side, and that's why an increase in productivity of labor is the right answer, because that makes the supply curve, aggregate supply curve, to shift to the right. An increase in government spending on transfer payments may not be a good idea, because that would mean people may decide to remain unemployed, because transfer payments can be unemployment benefits too. An increase in income tax make supply curve to shift to the left, because that will be what we call not good incentives for people to work harder. Similarly, an increase in average wage rate will also cause aggregate supply curve to shift to the left. So the best answer is D, which is a rise in labor productivity. The table identifies pairs of government aims, in which case is achievement of aim 1 likely to be consistent with the achievement of aim 2. In other words, the first aim is not conflicting with the second aim. So let's look at each choices. A says higher foreign exchange rate. So if the exchange rate goes up, we know exports become expensive, imports become cheaper, and that will make my X minus M2 fall. And that means unemployment will actually go down rather than going up. So A can't be true. If you want lower rate of unemployment, normally you need to make the exchange rate to fall. B says low rate of unemployment, low rate of inflation, and balance of payment surplus. So if there's a low rate of inflation, that means your price level is down. Let me use another color. If the price level goes down, then exports become cheaper, imports become expensive, and that makes X minus M to go up. And that's exactly what B says. There will be what we call a balance of payment surplus, because your exports will become more competitive and imports will become relatively expensive, and that basically means B is the right answer. So that's what 29B will be the right answer. But let's look at other options as well. Even more even distribution of income and high rates of saving. Well, if there's more even distribution of income, basically the rich is becoming poorer, and the rich is the one who actually saves more because he has a higher MPS. So that would mean there will be a lower rate of saving rather than higher rate of saving. So C can't be true. And D says a rapid economic growth. Rapid economic growth results in not sustainable economic development. In fact, there could be a rise in pollution, a rise in use of non-renewable resources. So D can't be the right answer. So the best answer here is B. In the last one, number 30, what is most likely to result from the discovery of oil reserves in a developing country? Well, if there is discovery of oil reserves in a developing country, something which Pakistan is hoping. Imran Khan recently announced that there might be some oil coming very soon. Well, if that happens for Pakistan, there will be definitely an increase in exchange rate. Well, why is that so? Because when there is a discovery of oil reserves, our exports will go up. So our exports will rise, and that will mean demand for our currency will go up, and that means exchange rate will go up. So the right answer here will be C.